All right. So next we have Mr. Nick Byers. He's going to be talking about the flight. The first time Nick jumped from an airplane was in 2002. We can date you now, but it wasn't something he rushed into. In 2004 was when the magic of the sport took hold of Nick, and he hasn't looked back since. With well over 7,000 skydives, he has achieved almost every level of rating in the sport and has traveled as part of the world Canadian national teams. Sorry. Nick's enthusiasm as an instructor and mentor for experienced sport jumpers is what drives his passion today. And as many of you know, when he is not jumping from planes, he is found flying them. So without further delay, Nick, I saw you here. I'm going to switch you over to a co-host. And all right.
Evening, everybody. Is my microphone working correctly? A thumbs up away from someone. Awesome, thanks. In an effort to maintain the time, I'm not gonna follow the CSPA document completely, because that's something that you can all read, and I hope you all have read and can kind of think about each of those items on your own. Thank you, Brian Murray. Leave it to you to have that right in front of you. What I would really like to talk about tonight is a few of the things that I think are most important, especially in and around small Cessna drop zones. Judging from most of the people's names that I recognize on this, we're either jumping on the island or at some other small Cessna 182, 206 type drop zone. So first and foremost, I think the big thing is to follow your pilot's instructions. And this goes under the normal course of operations, or especially in an emergency. The pilot is the pilot in command, and they're the ones that need to be in control, especially in an emergency. We're responsible for making sure that the airplane has fuel and the weight and balance is correct. And so even a simple thing like asking you to move specifically in the airplane to sit in a different position is probably because we've done the weight and balance, or we know the way that things need to be seated so that it's safest for us to fly. So if we ask you to sit a certain way, or we ask you more likely to not move around, it's because it's a safety issue and we want you to be careful and not mess things up for us while we're trying to fly the airplane. The next thing that I want to stress a lot is helmets on. All too often at drop zones of all sizes, I see people just sitting a helmet on their lap or sitting a helmet in the back of the airplane. And not only is it kind of useless to you if it's not on your head and it's sitting in the back of the airplane when we have an emergency at 400 feet, but it's dangerous to everybody in the airplane, because that becomes a projectile when we land in a soft field. And so it either needs to be on your head, or it needs to be attached to a seatbelt or to your chest strap when you're in the airplane. My recommendation is to make sure that it is always on your head. Not only will it help with noise reduction, but it will protect you in the event of an accident, okay? I know some of you are camera flyers, and you think it's really important for you to make sure that you've got your helmet in your hands so that you can point it out the window as the plane is taking off. Don't be lazy. Hook your helmet up to your harness, or hook your helmet up to your seatbelt. Take the camera off of your helmet and point it out the window. I would much rather get hit in the head in an accident with a GoPro than with your helmet that's got a GoPro attached to it. So please be respectful of everybody in the airplane. The next one is for everybody, but probably more importantly for tandem instructors especially, and tandem students who unfortunately can't be here to listen to me bitch and moan about the way they act in the airplane. But tandem instructors, please make sure, especially that your customers are doing this too, nobody grab the back of the pilot's seat. For those DZOs on the video tonight, they know how much it costs to replace a Cessna seat, and they know how much of a pain in the ass it can be. Those things are poorly made and love to break when people start pulling on them. Not only that, but once there's no back to the seat, I can't fly the airplane safely because I no longer have a way of making sure that the yoke stays forward. And so if you pull the seat back, I pull back on the yoke, we all stall, and then down goes the plane. So please don't touch the back of the pilot seat. The next one on my list is mostly for jump masters, but especially for anybody that's sitting in the jump master seat, and especially when you're on your knees in the jump master seat. Not only is it extremely important for you guys to make sure that your hand is covering your handles when you're in that position, but when you're moving out of the way for somebody to get past you as they exit the airplane, and you're all crouched up the way you normally are on your knees, and then you lean back, all you're doing is hitting the controls of the airplane. You're pushing in the prop and the mixture and potentially even the throttle, which can cause problems for me flying the airplane. So what's a better way to deal with that is to lengthen your torso, sit up instead of back. So hand across your chest, sit up, move yourself out of the way, and you're less likely to hit those controls. And that gives the person enough room to get out of a Cessna. Okay, so up, not back when you're letting somebody move past you. I know I've already sort of said minimal movement in the airplane and listen to the instructor. I have it on my list a couple times because that's how important I think it is. Don't move around in the airplane unless you've talked with the pilot or there's some agreed upon type thing, type situation. When you get to a certain altitude, you can start to move around. I know in a lot of small Cessna drop zones, you don't tend to wear seatbelts. You really should. At minimum, you should have them accessible, but for everybody's sake, in case of an emergency, you should really have that seatbelt available to you and on. At worst, it gives you something to strap your helmet to. Okay. Gear checks, as we just went over with Ashley and Dustin, if you can make sure those are done well before you get to the airplane, and then make sure that you do another one before you get out of the airplane. Luckily for me, I've only once had a parachute come open as somebody was coming out of the airplane. We all survived, of course, but it was not a pleasant situation, and I would really not like to have a parachute try to go over my tail ever again. So please make sure you're doing your gear checks before and after you get in the airplane, especially after any sort of movement. That said, if something happens in the airplane, if you see any sort of material, please make sure that you say something. See something, say something. It's the same as if you were in an airport in the US. See something, say something. Stop that door from opening if you see material. If you see material going out the door, help get that person out of the door. Get them out of my airplane. Hopefully we can all survive that one. And then the last thing on my list, again, I'm going to go back to tandem instructors and pick on you a little bit because that's sort of my skydiving specialty as well. I know a lot of skydiving or tandem instructors specifically like to hook up their passengers, especially at the lowers, as soon as they get into a small Cessna aircraft. It can be a bit of a pain, especially in the front seat on a narrow body 182, to get that passenger hooked up properly. Keep in mind, if at any point you are going to be in an aircraft emergency landing, you are now strapped to your passenger, and it would be awfully embarrassing if you couldn't get away from a flaming aircraft because you were strapped to somebody else that couldn't move. The same would be said for them. So if at any point your pilot tells you that you are landing in the airplane and it's going to be an emergency landing, make sure that those lowers are disconnected. Do not put yourself in a position or your passenger in a position of being stuck to somebody else in the event of an emergency landing, please. And that's all of my beefs. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask me?
Thank you very much, Nick. Look at that. 2 minutes to spare. Does anyone have any questions for Nick in flight? Going once, going twice. And Nick, you are gone. Thank you so much.